to take full responsibility for the horrible events of the last 24 hours, but you must understand. Our interest in their world was purely for the betterment of mankind. Everything has clearly gotten out of hand now, yes. But it was worth the risk, I assure you.
Holy shit, if that intro didn't get your juices flowing, then I don't know what will at this point. Doom single player is near perfection. It feels like it's what Doom 3 was trying to be, but never quite got to. It's got an amazing graphical leap. Every time I'm playing the game, it just looks beautiful, stunning, jaw-dropping, yet it can still run at 100 FPS on very high graphics settings. And you're gonna need every single one of those frames to fight off the hordes and waves of demons that you will run into in this game. The combat is engaging, fast-paced, and gory beyond all reason. That's one thing that a lot of people don't remember too well from the old 90s shooters, is that they're always trying to outdo each other with the level of gore and brutality. This game definitely wins the award for goriest game I have ever played, with the most brutal finishing moves I have ever seen. The first time I pulled the demon's heart out of his chest and then shoved it down his throat to watch him then explode, I just sat there in sort of awe of what the devs were willing to do with this game, and just realized that they were not going to hold back in any way. What I find so amazing about the development of this project is that they've really gone back to the source, which is weird because the original Doom games are like voxel-based, barely three-dimensional games, but they've gone back to them both art direction-wise, gameplay-wise, and they've borrowed so much from them, yet evolving the engine and the visuals and the kind of style of the combat a bit up to what a modern game would be. So I'm getting hit constantly with very strong senses of nostalgia and my childhood playing these games, yet at the same time the pacing and the intensity of it and the skill and the graphics are all meeting my modern gaming needs. Not to mention the soundtrack, which I think is something that I wouldn't focus on too much in my average game reviews these days, but in Doom it is so incredibly important to the gameplay and to get you going and to get you amped up to fight demons. The soundtrack is incredible. Not only does it remix a lot of the original scores, but it brings in the sounds of the 80s and 90s as well. I'm hearing a bit of Trent Reznor style 80s electronica mixes, not to mention some Metallica in there. It alternates between electronic and metal and cues up at just the perfect combat moments to just make you feel like it is time to kill. And when it comes down to it, so much of why I love this game is just the purely enjoyable, visceral combat backed up with epic music, graphics, and gore. And I feel like I gotta just show you a clip here without me talking over it so you can kind of get a feeling for what Doom combat and single player is like.
Demonic presence at unsafe level. Lockdown. Thank you. Demonic presence eliminated. Lockdown disengaged.
That's just one of what must be hundreds of intense demon battles throughout this game, and they do get challenging. Sometimes they might feel a bit easy, or you sort of see where the power-ups are and the good items are, the good routes to move throughout the combat arenas to try and take on your enemies. But I've died quite a few times in these combat arenas, just not anticipating what I'm going to go up against, or thinking that you're having an easy time of it, and then they spawn in 4 demons that you just were not ready to deal with, or like some summoners and some like giant beasts or something. Just the demons that come at you in this game are crazy, and you can usually handle one at a time, but that's what this game's really all about, is like saying, hey, like, it seems like you're handling those 2 demons just fine, here's 10 more, and then you're just like, oh my god, and you run around screaming manically trying to kill them all, while blood just flies everywhere. And it is just such a game that speaks to me on a basic instinctual level. Like, when I'm playing it, I just feel good. I feel like this is what gaming and first-person shooters is all about. And I realize it sounds like I'm writing a bit of a love letter here to id Software, and I'll admit it's hard to distance myself from this game emotionally. So much of my childhood was wrapped up in Doom 1, Doom 2, Wolfenstein, Quake 3 Arena, Unreal Tournament. These old school shooters really speak to me on a basic level, and to see id embody the things that made the original games great and just improve upon them rather than trying to redesign the game is such a welcome change of pace, and frankly unexpected. Even the level design of having to grab yellow and blue keycards to get past certain access points and beat levels, that was Doom in its very basic state. Simplistic puzzle solving followed up with tons of gore and combat. It actually is a great combination and a formula that has worked for a long time. Now, there are a few areas of the single player that aren't like 100% perfection. I think that some of the boss fights that I've engaged in so far, where you fight unique giant bosses, I mean, any old school Doom fan will probably be familiar with the Cyber Demon. You get to go up against some of the classics, and they just weren't that challenging or interesting to fight. They had sort of progression systems and simplicity to them, which definitely was old school, but I don't know, I think I was expecting a little bit more. The boss fights just didn't seem as challenging as some of the normal demon fights that I would go through. Visually, though, they're over the top and amazing to look at, and I'm not going to show them here just because if you're working through the single player, I don't want to ruin some of the lead-up moments. And speaking of nostalgia, you can't have a Doom game without the BFG. Just had to show it off here because it's a cool effect. That was always the most exciting thing to get in the original Doom games when I was a kid, was like, oh, the BFG, the big fucking gun, like, this is what's going to destroy everything, and it's actually useful in this for a change. I mean, if you're in a pinch and you're just surrounded by the biggest demons ever and you got your back up against the wall, switch to the BFG and it'll almost solve any problem for you. Storyline wise, the classic Doom story has sort of evolved a little bit. I mean, it's the same thing basically, but it's just been sort of modernized a bit. You're still on Mars. You're still in a company that's been experimenting with demon technology, opening hell rifts and hell portals to harvest the energy and use it for the Earth, because, you know, we're in an energy crisis. So the only way to solve that is to use hell energy that crazy scientists have discovered on Mars, and nobody else really knows about it. It's sort of this big top secret thing, and this giant huge corporation is just harvesting it and abusing it, and of course something goes wrong and then there's demons everywhere, and you gotta go to hell, and you gotta try and shut down all these crazy demon portals and stop cyber demons and whatever. It's fun. It's actually written fairly well given the plot at hand here. I mean, it's kind of a ridiculous concept to begin with, but if that's the plot you're working with, I think they did a good job. Now, I could go on and on about the single player here. It's incredibly addictive, and if you're looking for an intense action-packed single player, you can't do any better than this game. If what you're seeing right now looks like fun, then I can pretty much promise you that you'll have a good time in the single player. What about multiplayer, though? There are two aspects of this game, and multiplayer, unfortunately, was marketed quite extensively as being a big part of the game, not to mention they're having like season passes and DLC coming out in the future, so you figure that multiplayer is actually supposed to be a pretty strong selling point of this game. I feel bad for id because they did such a great job on the single player. It's unfortunate that the multiplayer is the one Achilles heel of this game. It's almost as if it didn't design it. Oh wait, they didn't. Certain Affinity designed the multiplayer. And that kind of tells you something right off the bat there. If you're designing a game and you just straight up outsource your multiplayer to a different company, it sort of means that the original designer inspiration was there to make a single player, and the multiplayer they're just like, let these other guys make it and hopefully they'll do a good job. And unfortunately, it's fairly uninspired. Luckily, Certain Affinity was able to update the game and make it support an uncapped frame rate for launch, which the beta did not support, so at least it's sort of up to the basic PC gaming standards. But then all we have to look at really is the game design itself, which just seems to be kind of a combination of a lot of other multiplayer shooters. It's got melee combat and grenades that are very Halo-esque, then it's got weapons and armor pickups that are very much from Quake 3, but the movement doesn't really resemble Quake 3 arena style games. It's not technically an arena shooter because we're not picking up our weapons, but instead crafting loadouts so everybody can spawn with rocket launchers and shotguns or whatever weapons you really want. A lot of the weapon balance seems to be a bit off. Then there's demons in multiplayer, which I think is supposed to be the one catchy thing. You know, every shooter has to have their big thing that makes them unique and different. And I guess in Doom, that's the fact that you can spawn in as a demon. If you pick up a demon power up and just absolutely tear people apart, which from the demon's perspective or the player playing the demon is cool, but for everyone else it's just sort of this overpowered bullshit mechanic. I mean, you can have a demon running at you and put like 4, 5, 6, 7 rockets into them and then just get torn apart, and there's like not a whole lot that you can do in a lot of those situations regardless of your skill level. So that to me is just kind of unfortunate. The game is supposed to be a high skill level game, but if you compare it to a lot of the more modern arena shooters that they're working on, like Lawbreakers or the new Unreal Tournament, or even games like Overwatch, they are much, much higher skill intensive, and I was expecting this game to be way more skill based, but it's unfortunately not. It's just sort of this spammy, ridiculous game mode with terrible melee combat kills. And I've gone over a lot of this in my beta video, so I don't really want to reiterate myself too much. We'll just say that the multiplayer is meh at best. It's just unfortunate that the way they marketed this game, if the multiplayer was not really marketed at all and just sort of like, yeah, there's going to be multiplayer, but they didn't talk about it, then people wouldn't really be expecting much. And then we'd be like, all right, whatever, there's multiplayer, it's not that great. It's all about the single player, which is so good. The problem is that they've got like season pass and DLC stuff planned, so everybody's thinking like the multiplayer is actually going to be pretty good, but it's unfortunately a huge letdown. So I kind of look at this game as if it's two games in one designed by id, the other one designed by Certain Affinity, and the Certain Affinity one sucks. It's not worth buying the game for. The single player, however, is. If you want 13 hours of just intense combat with replayability of like lots of items and things to get and like unlocks and accomplishments and all that kind of stuff, you can absolutely get your money's worth out of the single player alone. You might get a few hours out of multiplayer, but I can't really see any people taking the multiplayer too seriously. I have zero draw to come back and play it. If you want a number rating, I suppose you could say the single player is a solid 9 out of 10, and the multiplayer I'm going to say is a 5. There's nothing technically wrong with it. It runs, you can join matches, the netcode isn't great, and it's just unimagined, so I'll just give it a 5, you know. Not good, not recommended. Maybe in the future id will take a little bit more interest in the multiplayer design of their game instead of outsourcing it to a different company, but it's clear where their passions lie, and that's in single player, and they know what they're doing. Anyway, that wraps it up for this review on Doom 2016. Let me know in the comments if you guys have played it, if you're playing it, what do you think of it? And as always, I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.